This morning, today, we're beginning a new lesson, a new series we're calling Putting the Bible Under the Microscope. So let me begin today and begin this series with just a couple of topics that maybe people like to talk about every now and then. How about abortion? Some people think it's a right that everyone should have and everyone should do, and there's no problem with it. And other people think it's a terrible thing and it should be completely outlawed. How about same-sex marriage? We could discuss that if you'd like around your tables, and people's views on that topic. How about sex outside of marriage? How about whether you can be married to more than one person at the same time? How about whether or not there are many roads to God, many ways to access God? These are all some fascinating topics, light topics that you could discuss around your table, right? There'd be no disagreement, I'm sure, at all on those topics, right? Well, of course not. These are topics that are hotly debated all over the world. Now, here's the question. When there are disagreements over such matters, how do we decide? When there's disagreements over important matters like that, how do we decide who's right and who's wrong? What's right and what's wrong? Who has the final authority in life? That's the question. Who has the final authority in life? Now, when we use the word authority, to what are we referring? Well, as your outline says, by authority, we mean the right to demand obedience. When I'm using the word authority, I mean the right to demand obedience, to say, I have the authority, I have the power, you must do what I'm saying. You must follow what I'm prescribing here. Now, the biblical worldview is actually quite simple. Who has the final authority in life? Well, as your outline says, God himself. Who has the final authority in life? According to the biblical worldview, God himself has the final authority in life. Now, reason with me for a moment. Where does morality come from? Where do we get our sense of good and evil, right and wrong? Now, as you've heard me teach over the years here at Broadway, some who deny God's existence have tried to claim that morality is something that just exists. It's just out there in the universe. It's simply a brute fact of reality is what they call it. Well, there are a couple of problems with that view. If that is true, if morality just exists, if it's just out there on its own, how do we come to know it? If it's just floating around out there in the universe like some asteroid, how did it intersect with us? If it's just out there, this invisible thing called morality that's out there, how did we come to know it? And if morality just exists, why does it even matter? Right now, there are planets out in our universe that we don't know about. And so who cares about them? They're so far off. They're out there in the universe. We don't know about them. They just exist. Why do they matter to us? They don't interact with us. And if it just exists, morality is just something that exists out there, who says we have to obey it? So what? I mean, if morality just exists on its own, it would have no authority. It would be like the astronauts landing on the moon and seeing a sign that says no parking. So who's going to enforce that? It's just a rule that says no parking on the moon. So what? There's nobody to enforce that law. See, the biblical worldview is that all morality is rooted in God himself. Now, the biblical worldview is that God is the ultimate authority behind what we deem to be good and evil, what is considered to be right and considered to be wrong. Well, some people then say, well, if that's true, that means that morality is just something that God made up. Morality is something that God could change if he wanted to. Governments change laws all the time. There are things that are illegal today that were legal previously. There are things that are legal today that once were against the law. Governments change things all the time. So if morality is something that God decides, then God could change morality tomorrow. Tomorrow God could say, oh, by the way, from now on, murdering people who are good to you is now noble. It's now good to murder people who treat you well. That's the new law. That's what people propose. But this is a misunderstanding of the foundation of morality. Good is not good because God says it's good. Good is good because it measures up to who God is. Remember, we pointed out a while ago in a series at Broadway Church, God's nature is the ultimate standard of good and evil, right and wrong. Remember, we pointed out that there was a time you could go to somewhere in Paris, France, and there was the official meter stick. And this was the official length of a meter. And your local town or village would go and hold up their meter stick against the official meter stick to see if your meter measured up. Well, God's nature is the ultimate standard of what is good. Morality is what measures up to who and what God is. God's nature determines what's good and evil, right and wrong. Not God's opinion, it's his nature. And out of God's nature flows God's commands. So it works like this. There's God's nature, and out of his nature flows his commands. He commands us according to his nature, and out of his commands are our obligations. We have moral obligations. Why? Because God has commanded us. And what does his command flow out of? His opinion? No, his nature. This is who he is. He commands out of who he is, and our obligations flow out of his commands. Say, why are we talking about this? Because all of this brings us back to the simple statement when it comes to ultimate authority. God himself is the final authority in life. So where does God get his authority? Well, as your outline says, God does not get his authority from anyone or anything. As the creator of the universe, God is the ultimate source and foundation of all authority. God does not derive or get his authority from anyone or anything. As the creator of the universe, God is the ultimate source and foundation of all authority. Okay, so we're building something here. So God himself is the source and foundation for all authority. God himself determines what is right and what's wrong, what is considered good and evil. That leads us to a bit of a problem. And the problem is this. How can we know God's mind on a matter? God's invisible. He doesn't audibly speak to us. So how can we know God's mind, his opinion on it? How can we know God's opinion on a matter? How can we determine what God's view is on a matter? How can we know what God's nature is? Well, we come to know God's mind, God's opinion, God's view through an experience that is summarized by one word. It's the next blank on your outline. And that word is revelation. Revelation. Now, what do we mean by the word revelation? Well, as your outline says, the box on your outline, in the narrowest sense, the word means unveiling something hidden. Literally, discovering. You know, if you think about the word discover, we discovered something. It's to discover, to uncover. That's what discover means, to uncover something. So literally the word revelation means unveiling something that was hidden, literally discovering. Now, in a broader sense, that's the narrow sense of the word. The broader sense of the word, it refers to all forms of communication from God. Revelation, in the broad sense of the word, refers to all forms of communication from God. Every way that God communicates to us is referred to as revelation. Now, there are essentially two types of revelation. There's general revelation and there's special revelation. Today, as your outline says, we're going to look at general revelation. That's the next blank. We're going to look at general revelation today. Now, why is it called general revelation? Well, first of all, general refers to the scope of the revelation. As your outline says, it is generally available to all of humanity. That's what it means by general revelation. It's generally available to all of humanity. So this level of revelation is accessible to everyone and by everyone. You don't need special skills. You don't need inside information. You don't have to have secret contacts. Simply by being a functioning human being, you have access to this form of revelation. Secondly, general also refers to the content of this type of revelation. The content meaning it provides general versus specific knowledge about God. The content is it provides general as opposed to specific knowledge about God. Now, what do we mean by this? This is going to become clear when we highlight the two distinct types of general revelation in a moment. Here's the types, the next blank, letter C on your outline. General revelation is experienced through nature, first of all, through nature. That's the next blank, nature. General revelation is experienced through nature. Am I going through the blanks too quickly for you? Generally speaking? Romans 1 says, the wrath of God is being revealed. Notice that. The wrath of God is being revealed from heaven against all the godlessness and wickedness of men who suppress the truth by their wickedness. Since, look at this, what may be known about God is plain to them, because God has made it plain to them. How? Keep reading. For since the creation of the world, God's invisible qualities, like his eternal power and his divine nature, have been clearly seen. How? Being understood from what has been made, from creation, from nature, so that men are without excuse. Psalms 19 says, the heavens declare the glory of God. The skies proclaim, we got declare, the skies proclaim the work of his hands. Day after day, they pour forth speech. Night after night, they reveal knowledge. Now, they have no speech, they use no words, no sound is heard from them, yet their voice goes out into all the earth, their words to the ends of the world. It's a very poetic description of general revelation. The writers, Paul and the psalmist, are saying, by looking at creation, by just looking at nature, you can generally know that God is intelligent and powerful. That there's an intelligent, powerful creator. This world didn't just happen out of nowhere, out of nothing. But you wouldn't be able to know that God is a Trinity, or you wouldn't be able to know that God took on humanity in the person of Jesus of Nazareth by looking at a mountain. Creation or nature provides us with general revelation about God. A revelation that is general in its scope and general in its content. So it's general and it has a wide scope, and general in its wide and surface level in its content. Now, another source of general revelation, according to your outline, is the human conscience. The human conscience. Now, the word conscience kind of tells you in itself what it means. Con-science. Science is the word from Scantia, it's the word for knowledge, and con means alongside. So it's knowledge beside yourself. Literally what it means. Knowledge beside yourself. It's a unique human condition, meaning as a human being, we are self-aware. You are able to think about what you're thinking. You're able to have a conversation with yourself. I wonder if I should do this. I shouldn't have done that. I'm not sure that was right. I think you have conversations with yourself. You are aware of yourself. That is a uniquely human experience. That's a prefrontal cortex type of conversation there, where you're self-aware of your. And that's what conscience means. It's knowledge beside yourself. And listen to what the Apostle Paul wrote about this in Romans 2. When Gentiles, meaning non-Jews, who do not have the law, so he's talking about they don't have the Torah, Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, and so on. They don't have the law of God in the Old Testament. Gentiles who don't have the law, they actually do by nature things required by the law. Even though they were never told, don't murder, they know intuitively, Paul says, it's wrong to murder. Gentiles who don't have the law do by nature things required by the law, since they show that the requirements of the law are written on their hearts. That's a key phrase. That's been a famous phrase throughout the generations, throughout thousands of years. Written on the heart. It's a phrase for natural law, just basic intuitive understandings that we all have. Written on their hearts. Thanks for coming. Class started about 15 minutes ago. That's my wife, by the way, if you're wondering. Why was I humiliating this woman coming in? Yeah, that's right. Let's go back to the verse we were reading before I was interrupted. When Gentiles who don't have the law do by nature things required by the law, like showing up on time, since they show that the requirements of the law are written on their hearts, their consciences also bearing witness, and their thoughts now accusing, now even defending them. He says, so our consciences say, I shouldn't have done that. And sometime our conscience says, but there's a reason why I did that. I'm okay for doing it this time. That's what Paul's saying. And when God will judge men's secrets through Jesus Christ, as my gospel declares, he said. So Paul is teaching that we, as human beings made uniquely in the image of God, have a universal, generally shared sense of oughtness. We ought to do this. We ought not do that. Now, this sense of oughtness can be tampered with. It can become diluted. It can become polluted. And it can be resisted and it can be rejected. But we still all have it at our core, and it surfaces in all kinds of subtle ways. Author C.S. Lewis refers to this dynamic in the opening paragraph of his most famous book called Mere Christianity. That book changed my life as a brand new Christ follower at 19 years of age. It was the first book I ever read as a Christian. When I read these opening paragraphs some about 44 years ago, it revolutionized my life. When I read the following words, a light went on in my soul. Let me read for you the opening paragraphs of Mere Christianity. C.S. Lewis, who was an Oxford professor, he wrote this. He says, everyone has heard people quarreling. Sometimes it sounds funny and sometimes it sounds merely unpleasant. But however it sounds, I believe we can learn something very important from listening to the kind of things they say. They say things like this. How'd you like it if anyone did the same to you? That's my seat. I was there first. Give me a bit of your orange. I gave you a bit of mine. Come on, you promised. People say things like that every day. Educated people as well as uneducated, and children as well as grown-ups. Now, what interests me about all these remarks, Lewis said, is that the man who makes them is not merely saying that the other man's behavior doesn't happen to please him. He is appealing to some kind of standard of behavior which he expects the other man to know about. And the other man seldom replies, who cares about your standard? Nearly always he tries to make out that what he has been doing doesn't really go against the standard, or that if it does, there's some special excuse. He pretends there's some special reason in this particular case why the person who took the seat first shouldn't keep it. Or that things were quite different when he was given that bit of orange, or that something has turned up which lets him off from keeping his promise. It looks, in fact, very much as if both parties had in mind some kind of a law or rule of fair play or decent behavior or morality or whatever you want to call it about which they all agree. And they have. If they had not, they might, of course, fight like animals, but they couldn't quarrel in the human sense of the word. Quarreling means trying to show that the other man is in the wrong. And there would be no sense of trying to do that unless you and he had some sort of agreement as to what right and wrong are. Just as there would be no sense of saying a footballer had committed a foul unless there was some agreement about the rules of football. I remember reading that, closing it up, and thinking, that is profound. And C.S. Lewis is essentially saying what the Apostle Paul said 2,000 years before. He's appealing to this sense of written on our hearts that we all have as human beings, a sense of oughtness, a sense of right and wrong. Okay, let's do a quick review because this is all leading somewhere. We began by asking a simple question. Who has the final authority in life? What do we mean by the word authority, we said? We mean the right to demand obedience. We answered that only God himself has that kind of authority. Why is that? Because God is the creator of everything. Because God is the ultimate source and foundation of all life. That makes God the ultimate source and foundation of all authority. Okay, so God is the final authority in life, which led to the next question. How can we know what God demands or desires in any given situation? How can we, as mere human beings, know God's mind on a matter? Well, the answer to that, we discovered, is revelation. By revelation, we don't mean the last book of the Bible, By revelation, we mean God revealing, God uncovering, God unveiling, God communicating his thoughts to us. The only way we can know God's mind is by God revealing it to us. Revelation is the only way we can know God's mind. So how does God do that? How does he reveal himself to us? We learned that there are two types of revelation, general and special revelation. Today, we've been looking at general revelation. And so far, we've learned that it's called general revelation because it's generally available to all humanity and because it provides us with a general as opposed to specific knowledge or information about God. And further, we've learned today that there are two basic sources of general revelation. There's nature or creation and conscience. Which brings us to one final question for today. What function does general revelation serve? There are basically three main functions of general revelation. Here they are. First of all, it reveals God's glory. General revelation reveals God's glory. Remember, that's what we read in Psalm 19. The heavens declare the glory of God. Glory meaning God's perfection, his moral perfection, his perfection in all areas. The skies proclaim the work of his hands. Day after day, the skies pour forth speech. Night after night, they reveal knowledge. Now, they have no speech per se, no words, no sound is heard from them, yet their voice, that's a metaphor, you see what he's saying here, it's a poetic device, yet nonetheless their voice goes out into all the earth, their words to the ends of the world. No matter what language you speak, you can look at creation and it communicates to you. God reveals aspects of his nature and power to you. So it reveals God's glory. Secondly, general revelation, it renders us accountable before God. It makes us or renders us accountable before God. That's what Paul said in Romans 1. What may be known about God is plain to them. Why? Because God's made it plain to them. Since the creation of the world, his invisible qualities, things you can't see with your physical eyes, like his eternal power and his divine nature, have been clearly seen. They're invisible, but they're clearly seen. How? Because they're being understood from what has been made. So men are without excuse. Paul's saying, no one has an excuse to say, I had no idea there was a God. Paul says you can look at creation and it's obvious that this didn't come out of nowhere, out of nothing. Out of nothing, nothing comes. That's the foundation of logic, and reason. Out of nothing, nothing comes. So to imagine that just all this came out of nowhere, Paul says it's foolishness. Men are without excuse. And then he went on to say, they show the requirements of the law, our moral oughtness, a knowing of right and wrong, are written on their hearts. Their consciences also bearing witness. Their thoughts now accusing, now even defending them. So he says, we have this conscience and we have creation. And so it renders us accountable before God. We can't say, I had no idea. Thirdly, as your outline says, general revelation stabilizes society, providing us with a foundation for a shared sense of morality. It stabilizes society by providing us with a shared sense of morality. Think about this. All the peoples all over the world and tribes and so on, and yeah, we have unique differences about certain things, but imagine a world where there's no shared sense of morality, where one country torturing babies is good and the next country that's terrible. Like, we have nuances when it comes to morality, but we have a shared general sense that it is wrong to harm someone who has been kind to you. That it is wrong to be treasonous. That it is wrong to lie to people for your own betterment. That it's wrong to take what's not yours. Like, there are general agreements about these things. So imagine a morality that's completely different. It's unthinkable, really. No matter where you go, there is a general sense of right and wrong. It's a little nuanced along the edges because humanity and our consciences tweak it and play with it a bit. But we all have that general shared sense of oughtness of right and wrong. And so that stabilizes society by all of us having this foundational shared sense of morality that we can all appeal to. Which brings me to one final but crucial question, the last box in your outline. Is general revelation sufficient for salvation? Meaning, can a person come to a saving knowledge of Jesus Christ simply by looking at a sunset? Well, the answer is on your outline. General revelation is sufficient to inform us and guide us, but it alone is not sufficient to save us. It can inform us and it can guide us, but it's not sufficient to save us. You need more than general revelation to be saved. We need more information for salvation than general revelation can provide for us. We need a special form of revelation for salvation. And the next time we get together, we're going to look at the entire concept of special revelation. And that's where things are going to get really interesting. Because that's where, okay, we've got general, then we step into this special revelation. That's the area of Scripture, the area of authoritative words. And where do these words come from? And who says God said that? And who says that it's authoritative? And who says it's even not, does it have mistakes in it? Who decided how we got our Bible? We're going to look at all of this stuff starting next week. But the foundation we need to build on today was, first of all, talking about general revelation. And then we see the need, but we need more than our consciences. We need more than nature. We need a special revelation from God if we're going to talk about issues of salvation, issues of moral right and wrong. And that's why we need something like Scripture. And that's going to open a whole can of worms next week. And they say, don't open a can of worms unless you want to go fishing. We're going fishing next week.